The camera provides a built-in stereo microphone, as well as two XLR inputs, 48-volt phantom power, a choice of line or mic level on each input, and separate level controls for each of the two channels. In fact, the Z1 has quite a number of audio settings, around 20 by our count, that can be changed and adjusted. So, if you share the camera with other users, you'll want to double check all the audio settings before you begin shooting. So the first thing to do is to check the audio settings by pressing the status check button on the back of the camera. There are 4 to 6 pages of status information, and audio settings are shown on page 1. If you're not on page 1 after pressing the status check button, then scroll to page 1 with the rotary button. Here, you see the VU meters for both channels of audio. Unlike the other VU meters that are only displayed when you have the audio switched to manual mode, these VU meters work in auto or manual mode, and they're easier to read. Below that, you see the input status. Here, you see that our input is set for XLR and not for the internal microphone. Let's change that by pressing the menu button, the Audio Set submenu, and then Mic Select. It would be more accurate if this had been called Input Select, because you're really selecting between the internal mic and the XLR inputs, and there's no reason why the XLR inputs would necessarily be a microphone. You could connect an audio mixer or any other piece of sound equipment. You should know that both channels must be switched to either XLR or internal at the same time. In other words, you cannot have channel 2 recording the internal mic while channel 1 is recording an external source from the XLR connection. That's impossible to do with this camera. And as you'll learn in a minute, you probably wouldn't want to use the internal mic simultaneously, even if you could. Once you've selected internal mic, press the menu button again to exit. Now, press the status check button and speak or tap lightly on the microphone to verify that the mic is functioning. It's also a good habit to monitor your audio at all times with a set of headphones connected to the jack under this cover. Headphone volume is controlled on this panel above the lens. Right now, the audio levels are being controlled automatically by the camera. That's okay for some situations, but for professional results, you'll want to set your audio levels manually. On the rear of the camera, you'll find switches for selecting either manual or automatic level control for each channel. When you're in manual mode, you can adjust the recording levels by turning the rotary controls. The cover can be flipped down to make access easier. -20 up to -10 is the range where you want your audio levels to peak. Any higher and you'll risk distortion. Any lower, and you may not have a strong enough signal for editing. You should know that when your audio input source is set for the internal microphone, the channel 1 volume dial controls both channels. The channel 2 dial has no effect on recording levels. Pressing the status check button again will return you to the default display on the monitor. Notice that there are VU meters displayed now because the recording mode is set to manual. If you were to switch back to auto, the VU meters would disappear. Using the internal microphone should mostly be reserved for emergencies only, or when audio just doesn't matter very much. Although the microphone itself isn't bad, it's not isolated well enough from the rest of the camera, so any touching of the camera, handling, vibration, zooming, or button pushing can result in unwanted noise being recorded. For this reason, we aren't going to spend time covering the other menu settings for the internal mic. For any audio that matters, you'll want to connect external microphones or a mixer to the XLR jacks to get better quality. If you're shooting with an FX1, which doesn't have XLR inputs, we suggest getting an XLR audio adapter and mixer box like this one. The simplest setup for recording better audio would be to attach an optional shotgun mic to the microphone holder and a short cable to either the XLR connectors. Any mic with a diameter of 25 millimeters or less can be attached. Since 25 millimeters is actually wider than most pro mics, a little extra padding can adapt almost any mic to fit. Here, we're using an ME66 mic made by Sennheiser. If the mic you're using needs it, you can send 48-volt phantom power by switching this button. Next, you need to change the input source from internal mic to XLR by going back to the audio set menu and changing Mic Select to XLR. Now scroll down to the XLR set menu. This is where you configure the custom settings for both of the two XLR inputs. If you're only going to be using one microphone, you can plug it into input 1 and then set this menu to have the signal recorded on both channels 1 and 2. You can select whether the auto gain control of channel 1 is linked or separated from channel 2 when using an XLR input. This only makes a difference if both channels are switched to auto levels. You can set the XLR input for mic or line level. In this case, because you're using a shotgun mic, you want mic level. If you are connecting to a mixer or some other equipment, you'd probably want line. When the input level is set for mic, you can fine-tune the level of the input signal with the trim menu to compensate for a strong or weak signal. Settings from a -18 dB to a +12 dB are possible. Also, when the input level is set for mic, you can turn on or off the wind filter. Despite what the name implies, we recommend turning on the wind filter anytime you are using an onboard shotgun microphone, even if you're shooting indoors. The filter does a nice job of reducing all kinds of ambient sound and mechanical noise from the camera. Beneath the menus for XLR input 1, there are identical menus for XLR input 2 if you're going to be connecting two external sources. 4 modes are available for audio monitoring. Channel 1, Channel 2 lets you listen to each channel separately in your headphones. Channel 1 lets you monitor only Channel 1 in both ears. Channel 2 lets you monitor only Channel 2 in both ears. And Channel 1 plus Channel 2 mixes both channels into both ears. Audio output levels can be controlled with this menu. On the audio mode menu, 32 kHz and 48 kHz can be selected when you're shooting in either DV cam or DVSP. When you're shooting in HDV, audio is always 48 kHz. Audio lock can be changed only when you're recording in DVSP. The audio limiter can be turned on or off, but either way, it only functions when you're recording in the manual audio mode.